fitness license. I grew up down in Palm City. That's home to Martin County. Through that time, when I was a freshman, we moved down to the Keys. I spent 14 years down there. The reason of all of this is my dad, he was a commercial fisherman. He did snapper, grouper. He had a permit at the time, so that's what I did growing up, was bottom fishing. But we'll get more to that here in a second. But after the Keys, I moved back here probably 17 years ago, and I've been back and forth here since. My whole time growing up in Palm City, this is probably the most section of fishing we did. The groupers, since I've been little, the groupers, this was the spot. The snappers, pretty much everything for bottom. Unless we got down to the Keys or up towards St. Augustine, which I spent a lot of time at. Getting from that, last couple of years we introduced some more boats into the crowd. I started with a 25-foot Southern Cross, which that's for the last 3.5 years, it's the only boat I had, which kind of eliminated me from some days when it got rough to being able to get out on. So now, this year being the first full year with it, we got a 34-foot CV, which has trip marks on it. I can pretty much do anything you want to do. I can pretty much catch anything you want. You dream it, I'll catch it, or we'll try it for sure. Also during the winter from November going into February, it gets rough. We get the northeasterns. Also with that, it brings good stuff. We get the pompanos, the permits, and all that kind of stuff that come in. So now coming into those times of the years, I'm gonna pretty much be doing a lot of inshore stuff, specializing in things that other people don't try to do, like the pompano, the permit, and snook, which can't leave out the snook. But my biggest focus tonight is going to be on bottom fishing. I know that's pretty much what everybody wants to hear, wants me to talk about. So I'm just kind of going to walk you through everything. Here at a Fort Pierce, it's about 13 to 14 miles we get to the natural reef line. When I'm saying that, it's the natural reef, natural rocks that run pretty much from here to North Carolina, same line all the way down to Key West. The only thing that difference is, the more south you go, you don't have to run as far. You go out of Jupiter, same 80-foot depth that we're fishing out of here, 3 miles. Out of here, 14. You go up north, say Daytona, St. Augustine, 72 to 80 miles. So you're getting into the 80-foot line. Somewhere when you're running straight out between 65 to 100, there's going to be a reef line, no doubt about it. There's going to be some areas we have big rocks, which you hear at Bethel Shoals. That's some of the biggest reef probably on this coast that you'll see. Some of the biggest ledges, rocks, this monster stuff out there. And then more south you go, you'll see how it breaks up. You see on now Seymour maps, big thing, shows a lot of secrets. If you don't have many numbers, I suggest getting mapping systems like that. Seymour Maps, Navionics, Garmin, they all make good stuff to show a lot of things that can really help you. Like going south, getting back to that, the reef starts to split up a little bit. It's more, that's why you'll see mutton snappers, a lot more mutton snappers more south you go. Because they don't really care for that big giant structure. They just like hard bottom, because they'll get out and lay in sand most of the time. Now up here, more north we go, we start to see the big mangroves. The real big ones, we catch them 14 pounds. And that's when you'll see them up in Bethel Shoals, because that big structure. They like those big rocks. They get up tight and in that stuff. That's their home. It's like a condo. They move in, move out. They just keep hopping down the reef. They follow water temperature. Like grouper, people don't realize how much a grouper will move. Like you see this year, everybody's killing them. Lots of grouper being caught. This winter we had a lot of northeast, hard northeast winds after northeast, and all that cold pushes those fish. Grouper fishing up in North Carolina, you watch people up there, those captains that run out there, they do real good on them. And those fish migrate, they move. And I think this year we got a big herd of fish that came in. But going to it like that, when it is normal reef fishing, what I'm talking a lot about. So when we get out to 80 foot, I fish anywhere from 65 to 100 foot. First thing you know, every day is different. You can't go out there and expect the same thing you seen yesterday. That's for sure. You get out there, the day you were out there, you fished with 3 ounces, or you were swinging around the anchor straight down. Or you go out the next day and it takes 20 ounces to hold the bottom. So you never know what to expect. So you gotta be prepared for about everything. When you get out there, guys, the biggest thing when you're looking out on the reef, marking, you guys, there's gotta be something down there to catch. So you ride around, you got that hard red on the bottom. You get out there. The best way to find spots is trolling. When you go trolling, spend some days trolling, zigzag down that reef line. You're looking for, you'll see little scatters come up to it, you know, but somewhere along that you're looking for a ledge, a big depth change or something. You'll see just big pod mark, big giant. What it is grunts. It's grunts, vermilion snappers, lanes, just a bunch of little life, lots of life. And you want that that's what gets the mangroves and the muttons and everything in that area. That kind of makes it a good spot. Once you get there and you get anchored up on it, you know, the first thing I do, which tells you pretty much everything, it's a chicken rig. A little chicken rig with some squid. Now everyone knows everything like squid. I just run some normal 1-0 hooks. It's the first thing I do when I get tied on the anchor and anchor up. I pick someone in the crowd, probably the person doesn't look like they never fished too much before, because it's the easiest rod to use. Anyone can do this. And depending on the tide, you know, I'll start with a 5 ounce, and also it's telling me a lot of other things. It's telling me how much current I got. If I hand this to the guy and I put the squid on there and I say, hey, this is the only rod you're going to snatch on today. So when this thing hits the bottom and you lock it up and it starts shaking, give it a snatch. What I'm looking for is the grunts, but you never know what else you get. You see the big, all them trigger fish and stuff you see me catch, and a lot of times this one little rod that guy's holding catches most of those trigger fish. A lot of those lane snappers, because most of all my other stuff, I'm using bigger profile baits that I'm handing out, which tomtate, which is the grunt, is the official name, is the big thing I'm wanting. I try to catch a bucket full of those things, because throughout the day, that's my favorite bait. I cut those things into plugs. I use the heads and you cut it, and I'll show you here in a minute. You get that grunt, you that top fin, cut it right off. You lay him down, cut that tail off, and you look down that grunt, you see a little gold line that runs down it. Just split it right down the middle. So now you got two little pieces sitting there wiggling. Kind of right behind his gills, just like you're gonna do it, and cut those two pieces off, so you got two little plugs and his head. Now with the head, we'll get back to that. With the two little plugs, we'll use some lighter tackle and stuff. But the chicken rig, that's what we're using mainly is to do is get some bait in the boat and stuff. And also when they're dropping it down and I look at them a second later and I just see the line blowing out of it, kind of telling me how I'm gonna have to rig my other stuff to fish that day. How much current I'm gonna have, which is a big deal. That's why they make so many different size leads, which you can get at the Brooks there. My buddy, about everything you see in my box comes from that tackle shop right there. He knows a lot of my secrets, so he'll probably tell you what tackle and stuff that I might miss. I know he passes it out a little bit. But other than that, guys, that's the first thing I do when we get there. We'll drop that down, get some squid, get some grunts, see what's going on. And I'll keep somebody on that rod. That generating movement down there, getting life, you know. Something going up and down, all those grunts. You'll catch little beeliners and you're throwing them back. That's what gets those cobias and that kind of stuff interested. They're very interested fish, so all that going up and down gets their attention. Just other things, all that banging on the bottom, it's the mangroves and the muttons moving around. The muttons sitting out in the sand gets them pumped up. Just things happening. And while I'm doing that, I'm getting other things ready. Another important rod that I have on the boat, I don't do too much trolling, only when it's really good. The trollers are catching dolphin, I'm catching dolphin on anchor because they're swimming right down that reef line. That reef generates and has bait, so when the water's right and everything else is happening, those fish are there too. One of my favorite rigs is nothing but 3 6-0 mustad hooks that I took and crimped together. And with this, the second thing I do is I grab me an old fresh frozen live bait out of the old 5-pound sardine box. Starting at his tail, I put this hook in, this one in, and this one ends right on top of the sardine, right through his lip. So you look at it, this perfectly sitting on that bait. So when I throw it out there, it's a nice little live bait banging on the surface. That catches the kingfish, the dolphin, everything. I call it the blackfin, everything you see in my pictures and stuff most of the time. I do put live baits and stuff out when I can get them, you know, using a stinger rig or something like that. But preferably, this is one of my favorite things to do. And you know, this kingfish being a short striker, most of the time they hit off the back 2 hooks. So very rarely do you get, I mean, they will bite it off sometimes, but it catches a bunch of them without having to deal with the wire and all that. All right.
Does that rig have a name?
What do we call it?
Triple hooks.
Triple hook rig. Triple hook rig.
6.
Well, you want to see how I make it?
Sure.
All right, well, I can do that too. That's something I'm good at. Come on, Alex, you can hold the microphone for me.
You want me to hold it?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'll hold it. See, I gotta get organized like you.
You like that?
That's the hardest part.
It's my best tackle box right there. I had everything. As some like ones I'll get to. Pink candy, I lose some of my reels and everything. Use it for leader for a lot of things, for mutton fishing. You couldn't afford to use fluorocarbon mutton fishing the way I do because the amount of line I throw out sometimes, but we'll get to that next. They got all this crap here. Get the hooks. Here you go, buddy. I think this real quick. Very important thing to keep, especially when you're a charter captain. You get a tensional hook in you. These pliers have saved my day because they're only one of the few pliers, you know, that cut right through a hook. When it gets in me, first thing I do is grab a hold of that line and hem, and hold still, cut the line, and I reach over there and pull it through and push it out, cut the bar. So these things, no matter how rough they get, which Alex carries, he spends $70, so you spray some WD-40 on them a bunch and try to take care of them, but these here are going on about 7 months. Very important thing to have in the boat, in my opinion, and I
I've seen a dog.
keep them close. But when you take the 6.0 hook mustad,
Use
and
those.
get you 3 of them out. You take it right there, just a little corner of those pliers. Just kind of pinch it and pull like that. Take that other one there and you slide it in there. Like that. Now on these Manleys, they're one of the only pliers that are designed to do this. You see the little groove in there, it keeps it from sliding around on you, so you can slide that hook in there and just crimp it back closed. And then the same thing on the next one. Now on fishing inside the reef, you know, unless there's a lot of tide, and most of the time until you get out a little deeper and you got a lot of tide, I'll take and I'll put a swivel in front of the hook, like on that one you've seen right there, to keep it from like spinning around, you know, because it'll get knotted up.
Are you separating the eye or twisting it off to the side?
I am separating. I'm taking those pliers and just getting inside right there and just crimping, pushing down and pulling it apart a little bit, just enough. It only takes a little bit. You want to make sure you crimp it back because it will, if you don't, it will pop out there. Most of the time it doesn't happen because it's tight on the fish. Is when you gaff him and he shakes his head, especially mackerel. You'll see hooks fly 2 different ways. You're like, oh, I still got him.
Is there a reason you don't use the ones that come already open?
They come loose a lot easier.
They do come loose easier.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just had experienced a lot of issues with them, and just the ones that I crimped and undo myself, they're just much more better.
Okay.
In my opinion. My opinion.
Okay.
Much more better. There's a reason I'm a fisherman. Alright, any questions on that?
What's the brand of them pliers?
Manleys.
Okay.
Manleys, yeah, they make a shortest thing, but these, you know, you can squish down on them and they'll cut. I ain't had a hook. I use 10-0 circle hooks from Grouper, and that's the last thing I had in me, and it went right through it. So they can go through some hooks. I mean, they're just good for everything. You just gotta take care of them because they didn't build them to last. All right, any questions on that? The chicken rig, the grunts, the bait, anything?
I wonder how it got its name.
Going on to the next thing?
Chicken rig.
Chicken rig is the name because on the Gulf Coast they use it.
Its name? Did someone put chicken on it?
No, they call red snappers chickens over on the Gulf, and over there they'll tie multiple rigs like the commercial guys do. They use like 32 hooks at one time.
No
They
way.
catch them. Oh yeah, you look it on YouTube, you can watch them pull it up, one
30.
after another. And that's why you got the name chicken rig.
And they call red snappers chicken.
And the next thing I'll hand everybody out are these little spinner rods. Now, when I do this thing, is I'm just trying to burn time a lot of times, but these things do catch fish. Now, the mangrove snappers and stuff, I have a box of sardines on the boat. And while they're catching grunts, I'll take the sardines. You like their little frozen ones, you'll get, you could call them popsicles. They're all individually frozen. We'll cut the tails off,
You guys wanna look at that?
and I'll try to keep them as frozen as I can. I keep it cooler on the boat, you know, and keep them separated, because, you know, when it gets mushy, you drop them down, they
No, that's just.
They blow it off real quick. You know, a snapper, when he sniffs at it, it just feels like it comes off the hook. So if you can keep it nice, firm bait, it helps a lot. So I'll pass these out while someone's catching grunts, and I'll pass these out. You know, every day's different. If there's a lot of tide, I won't hand these out. You know, I try to keep it anything more than a 4-ounce sinker on these spinning rods. But these things are rated real heavy. This is like a 200-pound class rod. And reason it's so heavy is I'll show you here in a second. I lock it down. There's 30-pound braid on this, and then I put backing on it. You know, for the stretch, just like you've heard, and it's 30-pound pink handy that I roll up probably 15 to 20 yards into it. Go into a double uni to a single uni to the leader. This is a 3-ounce on here right now. Which those plugs that we were talking about earlier coming off the grunts, all those little ones, you know, they're not little. You don't want to make them little small things, you know, unless you're trying to catch lane snapper, love them. But when I'm out there, I'm trying to catch the big snapper, the mangroves, the muttons. So I'm known as a meat fisherman. I'm trying to fill a cooler every time I go out there. I want to kill shit. So definitely that's how I grew up. If we didn't excuse my language, if we didn't have fish in the box, we ain't making no money. But now though, with the charter, it's a little different. But I'm not that kind of guy. I want to go out there and kill shit. I want to fill the box up. Even though it takes me 2.5 hours to clean 40 mangroves in a grouper, hell yeah, put it on Facebook, make everybody jealous. Goal of the day. But going on, you know, with, I just got lost what I was talking
This
about.
is 2-up Mustad Demon Hook.
4-0. 3 times, yeah. 3-0. Better get these things in stock now, boy.
9174.
Yeah. I use the mustads. I'm a mustad guy all the way around. These are the demons, 3 times strong. I use a heavy hook because, you know, you get a cobia on there or something, they'll straighten it. Going back to the drags, you know, with the fish. These reels I use, you know, they 23, 24 pounds max.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got a 30-pound braid on it, none of that stuff should break. This reel should turn off before that. And another thing with the snappers, you know, that's about where I'll have my drag. You gotta have it tight. Now if you're fishing, like I see a lot of people give me their rods and it's like this, you ain't gonna catch many of the big snapper, because the first thing he does when I pull that, he gets in a rock, which I'm sure a lot of you know. So you gotta fish tight drags when you're bottom fishing. And you know, you pay attention, if you see pelagic fish like cobia and stuff like that, when they come up to the surface, you'll see them start to stretch way before they get to the top. And that's when you gotta, only time really you gotta loosen those drags. But bottom fishing, you gotta fish tight drag, real tight drag. I mean, just to get them off the bottom and all that. A lot of times with these spin rods and fishing light, this is more of a finicky setup, you know, when things are tough and things, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I hand these out usually to start with, especially if I see I'm only having to use 5 ounces on that. If I'm using 5 ounces on my bait rod, I start handing these out just to see what's down there, because everything needs smaller baits. That's where you see a lot of the smaller mangroves, the 2-pounders, the 3-pounders, the 5-pounders. And I play with the baits. I use a sardine, I give one guy a grunt plug. And when the bait guys get them little pilchards, some days I absolutely hate them, and some days they commit suicide. That's probably the easiest thing to catch a snapper on is when they want to eat it, but they don't always eat it. Very rarely, you know, do you go out there 3 days and they want to eat the pilchards. So the grunt plugs are some of the best baits for snapper fishing, because it can sit down there and take the beating. Because the little grunts, the vermilions, everything that ate that chicken rig is down there now sucking on that piece of bait you put down there. That's what I mean. You gotta use big profile bait. Like that whole grunt plug I cut off, you know, that grunt to start with is probably that long. And when I cut him down, and each plug should be about that long. You put down a little plug like that, you're gonna end up catching another grunt, or a lane snapper, or a beeline, or something little. So you gotta stick some of them bigger baits. And another thing I noticed on my charters, once I give them these rods and stuff, even with, you try to let someone hold with that big rod, which we'll get to next, and that doesn't know anything about it, it's pretty tough day. But the biggest thing with snapper fishing, and people go out there, people have numbers, and they fish like, man, I can't catch the mangroves and stuff, because when I go fishing with them, I give them that rod, as soon as it hits the bottom, the first thing they start doing is, I'm getting bites, but they won't get on. First off, the circle hook you don't snatch. You're just gonna reel down. You gotta keep that pressure on it. Our fish here, most of our fish we got, they don't get big being dumb, you know, they're smart, especially a mangrove snapper. A mangrove snapper, he's probably wanted, mutton too, he ain't far from being that, but when a mutton gets a little more onto it, he eats it. A mangrove, he'll play with it. Big one of them 10, 12 pounders, I've sit there with a rod and pretty much had to almost take the handle off the guy's rod to let him eat it, because he kept getting jumped. He played with it for 15 minutes. You run out a little bit of line and just drop it. What he's doing is grabbing the back of that bait and moving a little bit. What really gets them is when we get in the spawn and they get multiple fish down there, is when they'll get a little more dumber, when they gotta fight for it, you know. But when coming into the end of the season, like in October, when you start to see some of the real big mangroves, or in the beginning now, when they're starting to get together, they play with it a lot, you know. They're really careful what they're doing. You just gotta sit it there, and I just tell everyone, you gotta let it sit, because what's happening is the grunts and all that start bumping on it, and that's what you're feeling. That's all you're feeling is that. I mean, you can let that happen, you reel up, the bait looks the same, maybe a couple scales missing, because it's such a big profile bait. Now, sardine, you put it down there, a minute later, all that little nibble went around, you ain't got the big tug, you gotta bring it up. It's time to rebait and drop another one down there, because they do not stay on the hook very long. But the grunt plug, you can fish that bait for a good while, you know, and usually it's gonna tell you if the right one's down there. And you just gotta wait. Even when he starts getting on there, thump, thump, I tell everyone, just let him thump, thump. You're gonna feel the difference in the right bite. Once everyone catches their first one, from there on, it's on, because you know what you're looking for. But you gotta let them eat it. It's like everyone jumping up, and I look at them and go, hey, if you're eating a cheeseburger, and I walked over and slapped your damn elbow every time you went and take a bite, you're gonna throw the fucking cheeseburger in the water and say, hell with it. It's the same thing that snapper's saying to himself. He ain't gonna eat it. But yeah, why is that? And the conditions are right, I ain't got a lot of tide, you know, and I can get this holds into, you know, a good knot, 3 ounces, because the 30-pound braid, once you get down, it cuts through the tide. Good way to see what's going on down there. It catches I've caught 18-pound mutton on this same rig. It pulls on it, so you can catch big ones on it too. It's just a way to keep filling the box. But you know, depending on the people in the crowd on the boat, this is the big dog on the reef. Now that head that I had left over from the plugs, that's my favorite bait. If I go fishing by myself, that's on the reef, snapper fishing stuff, that's what's pretty much out there. And once again, you know, you get out there depending on the tides. You know, this is pretty much basic weight out of 4 piers, maybe 4 ounces. You know, 4 ounces to 6 ounces. It's basically a lot of 4 piers now. Here this year, we've been having a lot of tide. Last couple of weeks, there have been some 8s and 12s just out there in 80 feet. And out in the deep water, I mean, depending on what we're doing, I'll anchor in the deep water out there, and I'll anchor all the way up to about 210 feet. And that's a whole different ball game there. But you know, out there some days we were using 7 pounds to hold the bottom on a bent plug, anchored up. So everything's different. Ceiling fan, I want to replace that. But typically 4 piers, 4 to 6 ounces is when you're mangrove fishing and stuff like that. And for the mangroves in 4 piers, you know, especially when you get more north, you start stretching long leaders, like you hear a lot of guys say for the muttons and stuff, you're going to lose a lot of fish because they're going to get in the bottom. So let's stick with the mangroves for a minute. You know, this rod, when I flip it out there, I put the grunt head on there. This has probably got a little bit longer leader than, like I said, last couple of days there has been a little tide. This is actually pretty long leader. Typically I fish a little bit shorter up in Bethel and stuff like that. It all depends on tide of what you're doing. Now, you know, this is probably about as long as I would see with 6 ounces, you know, probably about a half a knot to 3/4 a knot. You don't want a sinker when you're throwing it out there and it's stuck to the bottom. You want to be able to pull up on that rod tip and feel that sinker kind of lift and just fall back down. You don't want to go, because when the fish goes and grabs and pulling on it, you know, he's lifting on it a little bit. So when he's getting that bite, especially from that finicky mangrove, the more pressure he feels, the less interested he's going to get in it, you know. You'll see a lot of guys free lining and stuff, trying to open spool on the fish and stuff. But you don't have to do that, because on my charters, trying to explain that to somebody ends up terribly. I have the biggest bird nest sometimes, and you know, I just learned through the years to just try to keep the rod tip down, hold it up here like Roland Martin, keep it down, point it out of the water. If he's feeling start pulling, just try to walk to the back of the boat. Let him have all you can, you know. You're waiting for that pressure. And you know, with these bigger leaders and longer stuffs with the grunt plugs and stuff, I ain't trying to, you let him eat it. You're really letting him eat it. You know, I ain't trying to get this hook back. I wanted to be in his asshole. You go to my cleaning table, you look up on the little wood board, you'll see these 7.0 Mustad hooks right here. And I swear by this hook, even when it's this rusty, I really like it when it's rusty, it blends in down there. So,
Also,
oh yeah, my favorite. This is what I grew up with. This is the only hook from my dad's boat. And now we got all these fancy circle hooks and stuff. I'm a believer in circle hooks too. Like with the spinning rods, you know, when you're fishing those sardines and stuff and that bait's sitting down there and they're puffing at it, the circle hook helps, you know, get them and stuff, because you just lift, it helps you hook them. This stuff here, they're already hooked pretty much. When you go to reeling, it's already in them. And I use J hooks pretty much as I can for stuff like that. Until you get offshore in the grouper in the deeper water, I'll use, because with the red snappers and stuff, I'll use the circle hooks.
Speak up a little bit, Brian.
Let me get your microphone back. But then going back to lead choices here, now also we'll switch to the mutton snapper for a minute, which is one of my favorite snapper to catch. Now, like I was saying, you get down to Stewart, you get more tides. Coming up this way here in the last few years, it seems like the mutton fishery's been getting a lot better. Seeing a lot more bigger fish coming up. Now, with the muttons, here we're going with the longer leader, which is a true thing. Even with the Bangros, the bigger ones, I usually caught on a longer piece of string. An old timer always told me that the longer the string, the bigger the thing, which my whole life has proven to be very true. Very, very true. But you know, fishing all depends on weight of what you're throwing out there. If it's a lot of tide and the current's moving, that's the days that you get to do that. And when there is lots of tide, a lot of people get intimidated by it, because you know there is days on the reef where even 32 ounces to hold the bottom in 80 feet. But those are the days that those big muttons are moving around. All the big fish. That's when you'll see the groupers on the reef that will catch and stuff in the shallower waters, because that gets that stuff out and moving. And down in Stewart, in some of the big tournaments we'll fish down there at the TCBA. Not last year, the year before, I think we were using almost 2 pounds to hold the bottom. It was moving that day. I would tell you how long it's 85 feet. My sinker would hit the bottom, and I would see my bait just start to shimmy off the surface and go down. So we were running almost 90 foot to 100 foot leaders. And that's what gets big bites. And you know, I've had the leader in my hand, the fish would be in the rocks underneath the boat, and me sitting there just playing with it to get him out. But that's usually only on big fish, because most of the time when you're in high tide like that, and you start reeling that up, that fish starts gliding up. He usually comes up back there in shark territory, where you're just watching jaws come after him, which is, you gotta get the bite first to get the fish in the boat, so you gotta do what you gotta do. And then when I get in the tides and stuff like that, you'll see me switch up my rig a little bit. I use these egg sinkers up here in Fort Pierce a lot, because you know of the bigger rocks in the structure. This stuff rolls off the bottom a little bit, especially when ain't no tide and when it's just sitting there. When the tide starts to pick up a little bit and I started using bank sinkers, the little teardrop sinkers, from pretty much 8 and up, I started using. My whole boat's loaded with big teardrops, and then all I do is I'll cut right here on my main, pull this sinker off. There's a piece of 50-pound tied on there with a loop with swivel, and that just goes on there and places this sinker before it slides up and down that line. So now easily I can have my little jar there with my 8s, 10s, 12s, 16s, 24s, whatever you know you might need that day. I kind of break it up in 4 different things in little plastic ammo totes they make now, which work pretty good for all those different leads. If you're gonna bottom fish, you better have a lot of lead. So that's one big point I can tell you. But when I get in that tide, I switch up to more of a slider sinker style like this. Even with my grouper rods, I don't use 3-way sinkers or nothing like that. I'm using straight teardroppers and then big leads, depending on whatever way we're fishing that day, if I'm anchoring or power drifting. Any questions?
When you're fishing your heads, do you step on them at all, or?
I do. I start off, you know, I'll throw one out there. A lot of times I'll take the top of the grunt and cut off probably the nog, you know, the rounded part, and cut it off part is where the brain is. When you step on it, you'll see that black stuff come out of there. Whatever that black stuff is.
Smells.
Yeah, it's like crack.
Yep.
So, I see that's for being a party boat captain. Well, I left that out too, guys. Down at Stewart there in Lady Stewart, I ran that boat for 6 years as the main captain. And on that boat, I learned so much as far as this area and stuff. Or you watch some of the old guys that get on there and what they do as far as stepping on the grunt and cutting it. That's where I learned a lot of my secrets. But any other questions? What's up, buddy?
When you're mangrove fishing, what's your average, a good average length of leader? 8 foot, 10 foot, 6 foot?
On the tide, you know, with the tides on the big rod.
With the 6
4
ounce, say a
on this
6.
one, a little short, it's about 10 foot, 10 to 12 foot, 10 to 12 foot. You know, when you start shortening leaders like that, it kind of, you're getting into the mangroves and stuff. You know, now I say that, we still do catch muttons. It all depends on your location too, you know. Now here in Fort Pierce, I always tend to try to have one longer, one shorter to see what happens, you know. And then we got all conditions, you know, we get out there, typically the tide's going to the north, your anchor heading. If I go out there and your anchor heading's 180 degrees, or I like south, what's the saying they say, was it west in their mouth, south is the best, or something like that. Anywhere where I'm anchored at 180 degrees, 240, any in that area is usually a good thing. Now when we start going out there, and the tide naturally running to the north normally, you know, that's when we get in the pretty water, the south winds and the southeast winds or the southwest winds. You get all that pretty conditions that are come up, and that's what you want for the bottom fishing out there. You go out there days, like I said, every day can be different. Go out there and we were anchored at 180, had a half a knot of tide, using 6 ounces, caught 40 mangroves. Go out the next day, tide's going the other way. Water turned green. No current. Just terrible. Drop the sinker to the bottom. The grunt rod. When that thing hits the bottom and it ain't going at every spot I go to, it gets tough. We get these things called updwellings. I'm sure you guys heard of them. The cold water coming in the bottom. They last 2 or 3 days. You don't know you don't know it until you get out there. It happens usually in June and July.
Drop your sinker and feel it.
You feel it. I mean, water temperature on the machine's gonna say what, maybe 81, 79, something like that on
See
that.
little track on there.
And you'll see a little funny little thing going through the middle of the screen, usually about 40 feet from the bottom. That's usually a sign of it. Sometimes it don't mark. A lot of times when it's bad, it will mark. Now the fish sometimes bite and some days it bite. You see some of these fancy guys got these little meters out there, and the bottom can get, it's 58. I've seen 58 degrees on the bottom out there. And when that happens, the only thing good for that day is usually if you're a diver.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're a diver, they're they're up in their condos, their blankets or whatever they got to stay warm, because if I was in 58 degrees, it would be bad. I don't do well in our 70s, so I can only imagine what it's like down there. We get the thermoclines, but the thing you gotta know, guys, when that's happening, also what else is happening that time of year? Turtles are hatching. Babies are coming off the beach. So don't get discouraged. That's the time when you run up to, you know, we got some of the best spots there is, really. Vero Cove up there and all those areas up there with all the muttons. They start coming and eat them turtles. I mean, there's other options, but that's about the worst thing that happens in winter. When you get out there, or during the summer with the updwellings and stuff, with the ever-changing environment, pretty much. And you get out there and that's going on. Some days, you know, the bottom will be squalled, the tide can go the other way, and I've had awesome days with that. But that usually with those things where you see the dirty bottoms or something generating a little bit tougher condition. Any questions?
How do you target those big fire trucks? Because I have a friend who keeps on bragging about it, and I just can't show him up because I've never caught a red.
Well, you can't say, they like deeper water. I've seen a lot here. Actually, guys, you got Chris sitting up here. He's with Southern Fortune. He's a really good fisherman. You watch his stuff, follow him on Facebook. He's caught a few big ones here later on. We were talking, usually they're a little deeper right now, the bigger ones are.
Yeah, you try to target them in like 180 to 260, and they're more of a dead bait fish. Definitely butterfly grunt, butterfly blue runner. They're definitely not more of a live bait fish, more like, they're just like scamps, dead bait, basically big dead baits in deep water.
You'll see them coming up on the grunt plugs. And out here in the last couple of years, our reef has been full of them.
Yeah.
I mean, just tons of them. A lot of short ones, but the more for the shallower water too, they do get in shallow water, especially getting in June and July. We catch them, not these big giant 20-pounders that you see some that we go out there and try to catch, but keepers. You only gotta be 20 inches, and I've seen 24, 26 inches old and 75. I've seen them at 50 foot out there in front of that Civic Center stuff, all those wrecks.
Yeah.
I've seen keeper red groupers come off those, multiple keeper red groupers, so they will come in. This is the best way to go out there on the reef and fish, and there's a good chance you're gonna catch a red grouper out there right now.
The slow pitch jig is really good too.
Mhm.
Just the slow, not the fast motions, just slow.
What colors do you recommend?
So golden red that I see is one of the, like a copper color, is good for the reds and the scam. And then like on the gag side, it's more of like green, whites and greens, orange, but white and green for gag and more of a copper for the reds and the scam.
Alright.
You have a question, Alex?
Yeah, just a general question that I think might help everybody. How long do you sit in a spot before you say this is not the spot to be in?
Kinda go your gut a little bit. I mean, if you stop at a spot and you sit there 10 minutes and call shit, I would say it's time to go. I'm moving. I don't use trolling motor, I pull anchor, so
Yep.
I make sure I get all I can
You're
before I
working.
start pulling.
You're working.
But,
I mean, grouper usually bite like sort of right away, and mangroves sometimes maybe take a minute. I mean, it's really
no,
like,
it's definitely on the grouper. And when you anchor, especially like anchored and stuff in the deep water stuff, when you put the bait down there, that's
It's-
usually the first thing coming up,
Yep.
Mr. Gagamuffin.
yep, gag is usually the first one to come get it.
So if you stop in a spot and you're catching grunts, you're gonna stay there a while.
I'm gonna sit there for a minute, you know. Well, on the first spot, you know, I get everything said. The first spot, I'm always there, you know. Good 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes, period. You know, you do all that work to get anchored up. You at least gotta sit there 20 minutes. You know, have a drink, hang out, give it a second. Like these rods here, when you throw them out there with these mug long leaders, you don't have. The best way to fish these rods when you got that is throw this thing out there, get it stretched out, throw your bait out, let this current pull it out. Like again, guys, and very important, you can't just go out there throwing 30 and 40 foot leader out of the back of the boat without the right conditions, you know. If you ain't got the tide, you're gonna have a mess. You're just gonna have it doesn't work right. So if you're using 3 ounces of lead or so, start off with 10 foot, see if you get bites. The shorter the leader, less chances of him getting you in rocks and stuff too. So if you can get him to eat a short leader, start with it. So throw 10 foot out there. If you're using 4 ounces, throw 10, 12 foot. I use pink Andy pretty much for everything now. On tough days, I ain't getting much of a bite. I do carry fluorocarbon in the boat. And I will throw 12 and 15. I ain't trying to stretch out no 50 foot, 35 foot long fluorocarbon leader. I did that one time in a tournament, it hit the bottom, lifted it, sinker got stuck, lost the whole thing. It was like a whole spool that had Andy out there on the TCB like 4 years ago. I looked at my buddy and said, never again am I throwing $58 out the back of the boat. So, I mean, does it help out there when you're doing that? No, I don't know. Really not. Now, like grouper fishing, I like fluorocarbon. Even in that deep water, for some reason, I'll use the pink Andy. I use 100 when I grouper fish. And I think it makes a difference.
Hey, Brian, do you do any much chumming?
Not up this way. Up this way, it feels like now, down in the Keys, when we lived in the Keys, my dad used to put us in the water and sit there with a machine. You had to, because you know you're in a lot cleaner stuff now. Up this way, you start throwing a bunch of stuff in the water, you get the wrong creatures swimming around the boat. We have a hell of a shark population, and when you start putting that, now they're in the summer in June and July, when with the snapper in full spawn, and you go out there and there ain't no tide, the days where you pretty much could use 1 ounce to hit the bottom. Those are the days you just take no chum bags, nothing like that, just your box of sardines that I bring, or a couple boxes. When this starts happening, you want a couple boxes on the boat. You know, you cut 1 or 2, 3 up while you're sitting there hanging out, and the boat first gets tight, throw it in the water. The mangroves here, just like the Keys, they come up. They'll come up in a column. You'll see them start doing little skiggies through your. You'll see something weird going, like a bunch of struggles coming up. that's usually the mangroves coming off the bottom. I mean, you don't have to throw a bunch. There's a couple spots that I got out there before the boat even gets tight. When they're doing it, I don't even gotta throw bait. I'll go back there, look behind my motor, and be like, oh boys, they're here. Now, when up here, when the mangroves do that, we get big ones. That's when you'll see some of the biggest mangroves in your life on the surface. I mean, especially when they're real hungry and you throw a couple pieces in the water, they'll come almost all the way up the back of that motor. And that's when you're really going to get to see how smart these damn fish are. You're going to sit there and watch them eat every piece you throw in the water. Walk up, bam, and eat it. And then you go and you get your spinning rod. You'll cut all this shit off there, seeing that excited as hell. Oh, I'm going to smash it. Cut this off, and it's the beginning of the season when you first see this. You do catch them. You just gotta know what you're doing. I start with 40-pound fluorocarbon. I put this off right to the pink Annie and put about 3-4 foot little leader, like snook leader, with that circle hook on it. This is the same size chunk that I'm throwing off the boat, back of the boat, that's falling. You want that bait to look just like those baits that are falling. If you're trying to hold it and you're getting it caught in that reel as it's falling, and it's stopping and falling and it's not falling with that bait, you can watch that fish stay away from it. He knows something ain't right with that thing. Now, the days and as the season goes and more people are getting them up and doing it, that fish, they're smart. They're figuring this shit out too. They're just hungry. Just really hungry, so they want it. Now, you get in there at 40, you can watch them snappers swim right up to that leader. See the eyeball twitch at it, and swim away from it. They see that shit clear as day. Clear as day. 20 pounds usually the number to get them to go, but you set that drag, them 8-9 pound snapper can hit 75 feet quicker than you can.
Test you and your gear.
Yeah, and they put it down there, boy. So you gotta be fishing tight drags. Everything's gotta work out, but you can get them you start off a little bit heavier when you start seeing that. If you can't get them to eat, usually you get down to 20. You get them to eat. Just once you break one off or so, they get 10 to it, and they usually stay down and they don't come back. But one thing you do know, that's a pretty good spot, because those fish are up there, and you go up there and show up in the day when they're biting on the bottom, then you know it's a good spot too, so you see them. But that happens a lot here in Fort Pierce. They come up quite a bit there, pretty much to the northeast grounds and all Bethel Shoals. I've been on a spot there and look like the whole ocean turned red when they come up. They usually don't last too long there, because when the first shark swims by, back down we go. Alright, what else am I missing here? Any questions or anything?
What about night fishing, full moon, does that make a difference?
I don't fish on the moons.
Okay.
For some reason, it's the terriblest night trips I ever had in my life. The night of the moons, I like full moons. I don't fish the night of the full moon. Usually leading up to 4 to 5 days before. We were just talking about the snook biting the last couple of days. We were just talking about these moons. But 3 or 4 days before, before and after of it, that's usually some of the best mangrove fishing you're gonna see, because when the sun goes down, all the grunts and all that stuff kind of lays low and gets down, so you can fish sardines all night. I started a couple boxes, them 5-pound sardine boxes. You go out there and just cut the tails off, or they don't spin up. This is pretty much on my night trips. This is the only rig I'm handing out, making this work right here, and this catches all of them. Because at night, you get on it, and as I swing around and stuff, and we're going up and down those sardines, this fish follow the boat around. And once we get, a couple 40, 50 feet off, they're not trying to get up in the rocks like they do there in the day. It's pretty much very rarely are you breaking them off and stuff. It's up until about last year, it wasn't really that many sharks eating them at night, but here in the last 2 trips I got to run this year, it's been pretty balls of wall. You got to reel just like you do during the day and get them up. 'Cause as soon as they get in that light off your boat, I think they see them and they're grabbing them. So usually at nighttime it's balls to the wall. When it's either a lot of tide or the water's dirty, the current's going the wrong way, we catch 12 or 14 of them, or those are when you see your limits. I had 48 limits last year of mangrove snappers, and probably 30 of them were at nighttime. So.
Can you talk a little bit about setting your boat up with anchor? You say you're using a hard anchor or a rope?
Oh yeah, I anchor. I'm not a big. I like trolling motors in the river and stuff, but with me being a charter captain, I got to make sure my shit works every day. I can't go out there and run 14, or my grouper trips. Some of the times I'm running 44, 45 miles on my big boat to go to some of these grouper spots, or through the day. That's where I end up, and everything's got to work. And see a lot of problem with trolling, but just through the years I've learned how to anchor. I'm pretty quick with it. So it all depends on what you're doing. You know, on the reef I run a different system than I run if I throw it out there in 150 feet. If you go out there and start throwing shit in 150 and 180 feet, you better be ready. It's a whole different ballgame. You need a little practice in the reef and stuff. Now I throw on a reef, typically it's the captain book, but seven times whatever the depth is. You can cheat it a little bit, you know, at 80 foot. You really don't have to throw it, but when you get out into tide, when you start playing with 3-4 knots of tide and throwing an anchor, you better probably add a little bit more than what they even tell you, because shit's moving. And when that boat catches out there in that tide, it feels like it's planing off still. But on the reef, you know, you can get away. I run about 250 foot past my spots and throw out the rope. But I got about 300 foot of rope out in 80 feet when I'm fishing.
So you do a couple drifts to see where?
Oh, I got you. Now when you pull, first thing you do when I go to the spot, I put my waypoint in. You got your bearing going towards the spot. Then you got your course of ground. That's two very important things you need to have on your Garmin or your Simrad or whatever you run. You need you need your distance to destination. Those three things are going to tell you how to anchor the boat. That's what I use. Now you go to your bearing, which is the bearing to the spot, and you pull up to it. The first thing I do is when I get to the spot, I zero out. Pull up to it, completely stop the boat as close as I can, 10, 12 feet. Get right on top of it, pull it back in neutral, let it sit. Let that boat drift. That's when you get the sinker out for that rod, put some squid on it, get shit ready, get the anchor laid out on the deck, get everything kind of ready. You're watching that, and you know some days it's faster than others. Some days when there's tides, you can look at it and you drifted already 80 to 100 feet, or you already drifted 350 feet, depending on the tide that day. You look at that bearing. That bearing's going to tell you on your compass where you got to run back. Now, since you made that long drift, that's pretty much how you're going to lay on that. So once you stop on a spot, you look at your bearings 180 degrees back to your spot. So you know that's where the anchor's got to sit. That's 180 on your compass when you drop that hook. So what you do, then you turn around. You got your course of ground too, showing where you're running on your boat. You want to run right back to that spot, pretty much zero out on it, and hit that bearing. You might end it up here a little bit, but as soon as you get as close as you can, you want to hit on your compass 180 right there on top of that spot. And that's when I run 250 to 300 feet up. Throw the anchor right off the side. You don't want to haul ass back. Let that anchor fall down. Pull on it a couple times. Let the anchor chain get straightened up. Let it touch the bottom. Let it go. Let the rest of that line just fall out of there for it all natural laying out with the tide. You get about 75, 80 feet. You want to kind of start tying it off and give it a couple bumps. Let the slowly work in there and get in the sand. Excuse me. On the anchor, we call them reef wreckers. They're big claw anchors. That's what I use a lot on the reef, big claw. Now when I get out there and start throwing it out there in the deeper water, I use the biggest, nastiest thing I could find, the Danforth. I try the claw anchor. Biggest thing with bottom fishing, you know, and you find where you need to be, you need to stop. You got to be on top, you know, especially that mangrove, especially when you groupers out there, you know. I anchor a lot of times, and if you can get the boat on top of that stuff, it's some of the craziest fishing I've ever seen in my life, you know, because big fish like that, you know, they don't really want to chase baits, especially when you're moving 2 knots and you're dragging that shit, bouncing on the sand, keep letting line out. You go right past, unless you hit him right in his head, you know, they're fast, he'll reach there and grab it, but, you know, it's just like fishing in the shallow or an 80 foot, you know. You get 2 big rods off the back of that boat, get anchored up, you start dropping baits down there, you get the AJs pissed off, you get the red snappers, you catch 1 or 2 of them. While you're doing that, there's one thing down there that's got yellow eyes that's getting real pissed off usually. And when just making motion, that's what gets him to come out. You know, if you can get stopped on that deep stuff out there, usually that's the ticket. Even with power drifting, you know, you catch them like that, you gotta have a boat driver and someone that's how to work the rod. That's the biggest thing I don't have being a charter captain, because a lot of times I'm by myself, you know, and just trying to do it all alone don't work. Because when you're power drifting, you can't have a whole bunch of scope out of the back when you're grouper fishing. You pretty gotta be up and down on that thing, you know, with that sinker. When you're sitting there just like if you were anchored up, you can see that rod tip, that sinker bounce, you know, then everything's working right. So you gotta be able to know what you're doing, or ain't know what you're doing, it's just you gotta have 2 people someone driving the boat, and then someone back there keeping the sinker right there on the bottom. So when you get out there doing that kind of stuff, it's experience, time, practice, a lot of that. Starting on the reef and playing with the reef there, kind of work your way up to it. Any questions?
Do you lose anchors very often?
No, I don't. I don't throw mine in the rocks. I watched that screen big thing. When I ran the party boat down there, that captain down there, I shouldn't talk about it. He lost 3 or 4 a year. And I always wondered, what are you doing? He just sit there, you know, he would run up, look at it. Oh, he's looking at his distance. And he was like, let it go. We sitting there like, ooh, kiss that anchor goodbye. You know, you gotta be watching, you know. You see shit marking and fish still marking, don't throw your anchor there. Wait, keep riding. I keep on my little boat that I anchor on the reef and stuff. There's 2 rolls of 600 foot from West Marine on there, a half inch, so there's 1,200 foot on that boat. Because I did start, before I got the big boat, I did a little bit of groupering on it and I had to kind of set up. Now on the big boat, 34 foot, I'm throwing a 30-pound anchor. I had 4 rolls of 600 on it. Mostly I start about 750 to 800 feet I throw out to start with, but I also stop the boat 250 feet in front of the spot, especially out there. I want to try to lure them to me to start with, especially the big ones, you know. I fish heavy gear, fish a lot of bent butt rods, 80-pound braid, all 100 from there. And you know, then I'll slowly let the boat fall back to it and try to get into its condo. The closer you get to it, even with the biggest and nastiest shit, this fish are that's some of the meanest fish are the groupers, and you just gotta be on it when they hit it. Be ready. It's about
your boat, how many people can you take out, and can you talk about split trips? Because I see you advertising split trips a lot on Facebook, and I know a lot of people in here may not know what that is.
Gotcha, yeah. We run an anglers on our Facebook page. We run a split group. It's on the 25-foot boat, where you can get someone. If you're only one person, you know, you can call and schedule. A lot of times now these days, you know, I have a lot of private trips booking up and stuff, and a lot of my cancellations are where that comes from. You know, we utilize that on that. You'll see if you go to our Facebook page, it's a separate link on the top there. It's a single riders page. So you can put your name in there and you get notifications anytime one does pop up. Like during the summer, you know, most of the time it's gonna be last minute, stuff like that. So if you're a local around and stuff like that, it's a good thing to utilize if you're by yourself just looking to get out. What was your other one?
How many people?
On it was 3 different boats. So I'll go ahead and start with the Southern Cross. That's the first boat I got. It's 25 foot. It's kind of a custom boat. It was built for drifting and bottom fishing. So like one of the older Parkers, like a Gold Line. It's a little flat. It's a single power boat. Got a 250 Azuki on it. It takes, you know, do 14 miles. It's a slow boat, slow and steady, win the race. About 20 mile an hour, 21 mile an hour to get out. So it's about 45 minutes to get to the reef line out there on that boat. You know, it's very simple, built to kill shit. You got 2 big coolers in it. And actually I built most of that boat myself. I bought the hull, so it's kind of special to me. That one we haul 4 people in. We do 2 different trips. We have a 5-hour trip and a 7-hour trip. And then we have a 22-foot sportsman, which pretty much I start that in November when the pompanoes start to show up. Do a lot of inshore stuff when it starts to get rough outshore. I'm not the kind of captain that's going to take your money out of there. I'm very honest, very straightforward. If it sucks, I'm going to tell you it sucks. So, you know, I fish a lot. I'm fortunate enough where I get to go almost every day during the summer. So, if they ain't biting, I'm going to tell you. But if you want to go, I'm willing to keep trying. And, you know, when it gets rough, I don't want to get shit beat out of me no more than you do. So, you know, I tell you straight up, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is what it's going to be. If you want to go, I'm going to go. But, you know, I'm going to tell, I'm not just there to take your money like a lot of, like some people do. That's worked best for me, being honest. So I'd be as honest as I can about everything with that.
I just wanted to say, I fished with you a couple of years ago, and you run a very good trip.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. You look familiar. Did we do any good?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, that's good to hear.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier muttons on the beach, turtles in the
Yep.
summer. When does that go into full swing? And can you? I mean, I've caught muttons off the beach in other months other than that. I mean, but is it like just that much more enhanced, or?
July, I think, right when you start seeing all the pretty pictures of everyone posting on Facebook, that's my cue. When I scroll- Facebook's the best thing in the world. I just say, I got it. I mean, if you don't like to say nothing, I don't like this. This is the most talking I've done in a long time in front of people. You know, I don't even say nothing on Facebook or nothing like that. I use that to look when people want to tell me free information. I won't take it, especially during the wintertime. All these pompano sites now. People, I call 6 on the beach. All right, I'm gonna be there tomorrow and catch 100. I mean, that's good stuff. So you're paying attention, you know, I get all these different things, Treasure Coast Fishing Hub and Fort Pierce. I mean, they're great. They advertise for us. UTC is a good way to know what's going on. I mean, you got some idea of what's going on, you kind of can see what they're catching and know what's going on. And I forgot, also the CV, it's a 34-foot boat. It's got all the shit on it. We finally went out and got a boat that has the speed. I can do this, what does these grouper trips, you know, I can get out there to get out in the grouper. It's another 6.5 miles from, you know, the normal reef line that we're fishing to get into most of that. Cause they do come up on the reef, but you know, they shut it down. In the winter times when most of our gags and stuff come in, that's when they spawn. So they come in shallower. During the summertime, cause the water temperatures, they get out there in the deeper stuff. Probably from 120 on, you're getting into red snapper, gag groupers, scamps. A little bit deeper, some like the reds, they get in a little bit deeper water. But the CB, you know, another plans we had, which they messed up, golden tile, you know, I had big plans for that. I got beat on.
Me too.
But you know, it's the boat where you got the bathroom and all that kind of fancy stuff, and I can run the Stewart when the muttons start biting and all the other options. And you're gonna see, as times go, I do like doing a lot of sword fishing, so that's gonna be one thing you'll see popping up there too. So, that boat, I can haul up to 6 people on it, so
It's on my bucket
it's
list.
more of the family boat or the real hardcore boat, so. Any other questions?
All right, let's hear it for Brian Savage. Savage,
Guys, thanks for having me, I appreciate it.